What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the first part of a story where QUIRKLESS Izuku was the wielder of the true spear of the biblical god, ELOHIM. If you want a quirk, there might be a way for you to do it. Pray for a quirk in the next life and jump off a roof. Maybe then you might be able to become a hero. Bakugo said, as Izuku stared at the boy with an anguished look. The boy would walk down the road as he remembered his life growing up with a religious mother, as she would take him to a church in the city. So as he walks over to the church, he takes the time to really think about what Bakugo had told him to do. And as he enters the Catholic church, he notices a confession room and makes his way over there. As he sits in there for a moment, someone enters on the other side and begins to listen. As soon as Izuku hears the door close on the opposite end, he hears a feminine voice that was extremely soft ask him a question. "What do you have to confess, young man? Is it really a good idea to kill oneself?" Izuku asked as he started to tear up. "What brings this up, young man?" The woman asked as Izuku started to confess about his anguish, how everything in his life had been completely torturous ever since his diagnosis, culminating in a confession to the woman. I wonder if I should really listen to K-K-Kacchan," Izuku said as the woman starts to feel incredibly sad. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more information. Now, let's get into part 1. Izuku was a young boy who grew up without a father. He had his own mother to take care of both the jobs of a mother and father in order to raise her son in a world which hated quirkless individuals. Because of this, Izuku had learned to just hide any and all things that happened to him from a very young age. And it was around the age of 5 when he learned one cruel but true statement about life. Not all men are created equal. Izuku was playing on his own in the park when he heard a small fight being made around the corner of his little place, where he thought about the church his mother always brought him to on Sundays. Walking around the corner, he found a young boy holding his left arm in pain, as he was surrounded by an ash blonde boy with an attitude to match his explosive hairstyle. Running over to make sure the child was okay, Izuku had looked at the wound of the child as he tried his best to place some bandages on the wound. It had been a few months since Kacchan had been rude to him all the time, and he brought bandages in order to cover wounds so that his mother wouldn't have to see them. Once he was complete with his mission to help the child, he turned around to look at Kacchan, the boy who was glaring hard at him. "What the hell are you doing here, Deku? What's a quirkless freak like you going to do?" The boy screamed as Izuku started to tremble. He had forgotten that the wound was a burn similar to a handprint, and he started to remember that he shrugged his old friend off without a hello. "K-Kacchan, you can't just go around hurting others. You could get in trouble," Izuku called out as the ash blonde boy glared harder. "What are you going to do about it, Deku? You're quirkless," Kacchan said as he growled at the boy. "I know I can't win against you, K-K-Kacchan, but if I must I will fight you," Izuku said, putting on a brave front. A mere moment later the boy was accosted by the explosive boy and was lying on the ground, the boy he defended and helped having left him. Thinking about his life from that moment on, Izuku noticed the true meaning of not everyone being equal in life. It is here that time passes by as we notice a much brighter sunny day in the world. A young man with green hair with black roots is seen running through the streets. His eyes are somewhat dull, but emerald in color. He has a big smile on his face as he hears the commotion of a villain fight on his way to school, as he stops in the crowd just in time to see Kamui Woods, a rookie hero, take on a villain who had a gigantism quirk. He smiled as he wrote down some new things he saw about the hero this time than he first saw the hero. "Oh my god. That's Kamui Woods. You got this, Kamui," some of his fans called out. The way he uses his arms as an extension whenever he uses his quirk to create his super move is really cool. I wonder if there is ways he could change it into an offensive move. The boy muttered as he wrote in his notebook he held. It said Hero Analysis number 13 on the front as an old man with a mutation that held a star on the upper left part of his head that had a small amount of skin connecting it to his head as he looked at the boy. The old man smiled at the boy as he looked back at the fight as the hero was about to activate his super move Lacquered Chain Prison. Preemptive Binding. "Lacquered Chain Pris," the hero said, before another voice came out. "Cannon Canyon." A surprisingly feminine voice came out as a large foot landed in the villain's face. It knocked the villain out as he laid on the street, having crushed some vehicles on the way, and the young boy noticed that it was a new hero on the scene. "Hello everyone. My name is Mount Lady. Nice to make an acquaintance," the heroine said as the boy wrote some things about her. "Very tall, has a nice look about her, really nice eyes." Quirk could be used in different situations as well, but not in an urban environment like a city. The boy muttered to himself as the star-headed man looked back at him. "Taking notes there, young man? Well, are you going to try and become a hero?" the man asked as the boy nodded happily, putting the notebook away. "Yeah, I just love heroes so much that I want to become one." Taking notes allows me to have a head start on how to learn to counter certain heroes and villains I come across," Izuku said as the boy looked over at the man. "Well, I will be rooting for you when you go pro," the man said as Izuku held a few tears in his eyes before nodding with a genuine smile. "Sure thing," Izuku said as he ran towards the school. A few hours had passed since the morning events as Izuku was sitting in his seat waiting for the school day to be over. His day had gone from a very good morning to a very bad day as he was attacked everywhere in his school, even having to patch himself up when he was hit particularly hard by an underclassman strength-enhancing quirk. He was continuing to write in his notebook near the middle of the class, just a few seats behind Kacchan, as he focused on his notes. He was so focused on his notes he nearly missed the teacher entering the classroom with some papers in his hands. "Hello students, and welcome back to a day where you will need to choose your career choice for the future," the teacher said as the students all groaned about why they had to fill out forms. "But we all know you all wish to become heroes," the teacher said, tossing the papers in the air as the class celebrated by using their quirks. Now, stop using your quirks, we need to get back to the lesson," the teacher said as Kacchan's voice was now heard. "Don't lump me in with these losers, sensei. The most that they will become are D-lister heroes at best," Kacchan said as he relaxed in his seat whilst the rest of the class had called him out on his arrogance. "Oh, that's right, you wanted to go to UA, correct, Bakugo?" the teacher asked, stroking the boy's ego that was already too high to begin with. "Wait, really? I thought it was like a 2% chance to get in. Wow, he really is aiming high. That's right, you losers. I aced all the mock tests as well as the mock exams. I will become the next #1 hero. I will become more famous, richer, as well as more popular, that all might," Bakugo said as Izuku shrunk in his seat. He knew his name was going to come up since that was the very school he had placed his name in as well to go to. "Ah, I believe that Midoriya has plans on going to UA as well, right Midoriya?" the teacher lazily asked as he pulled out a phone in order to look at the news. Once this was shown, Izuku knew that this day was about to get worse as he felt the presence of Bakugo coming towards him. Dodging as fast as he could, he placed his notebook in his backpack in order to protect his notes from the attack. But that coincidentally had placed him in position to fall out of his seat from the force of the attack, and Bakugo moved in on him. "What the hell have I told you about going for UA, Deku?" Bakugo screamed at the boy's face. They removed the QUIRKLESS ban 2 years ago, K-K-Kacchan," Izuku said as he scrambled to get away from the much taller boy. Because of the constant attacks on Izuku by Bakugo, Izuku's body certainly developed a way to stay out of the older boy's way. It had kept his height at a constant smaller size compared to him, that way Izuku could keep himself out of the older boy's way. "What can you even do, Deku? You're quirkless, you die in the entrance exams if that," Bakugo said as the teacher chose that moment to come in. "Alright Bakugo, what have I said about quirk usage in my class?" the teacher droned as Bakugo walked back to his seat and Izuku shuffled back to his own. The class went on as usual as Izuku wrote down the lesson plan as well as what he needed for his homework to be done within the next day. It was nearing the end of the day that Izuku was clearing up his desk in order to leave. He was staring at a singular flower inside his desk's chamber when Bakugo showed up. "We're not done, Deku," Bakugo said as Izuku looked up as the young man had grabbed his notebook. "What have I told you about this?" Bakugo asked in a livid tone. Hey. Give that back. I worked really hard on it," Izuku said, stuttering a little. "What did you say?" the boy asked as he blew up the notebook in his hand, not giving his lackeys a moment to even read it. Why would you do that? I used so much time to make it," Izuku whined as Bakugo tossed the notebook out the window. "No," Izuku screamed as he ran over to the window as Bakugo pulled him away from it so he could look the taller boy in the eye. "When I say this, Deku, you should probably listen," Bakugo said as he placed his hand on the smaller boy's shoulder. Izuku could feel the heat coming from the hand as he felt the searing hot pain of it hitting his left shoulder, but didn't show any pain, just slight fear. "I am a perfectionist, so don't go to UA if you know what's good for you," Bakugo said as he walked over to the door. As Izuku was sulking and licking his wounds, Bakugo stopped at the door to the classroom before looking at the distraught boy. "You know, there might be a way for you to become a hero," Bakugo said as Izuku looked over with a slight light in his eyes as he stared into the ruby eyes of Bakugo. "Pray you get a quirk in the next life and jump off the roof. Maybe then you might become a hero when you are reborn," Bakugo said as Izuku gained an anguished look in his eyes as he glared at Bakugo. Not deterred by the boy's glare, Bakugo smirks evilly at the boy as he adds a few pops of his quirk, which causes Izuku to calm down from his anger and replace it with that fear-stricken face again. Bakugo decided to leave after that, and whilst that happened, Izuku stayed in the classroom to get control over his raging heart again. The seed was planted by Bakugo, and Izuku couldn't get those words out of his old friend's mouth. Collecting his notebook from the koi pond outside in the courtyard, Izuku was walking over and around the neighborhood near an underpass. As Izuku looked at the underpass, in another universe he would have walked underneath it in order to go home and meet the number one hero, but in this one, Izuku continued to walk in the opposite direction. He was walking in the general direction of the church his mother used to always take him to when he was younger that he went to now that she was gone. She had died long ago in a villain attack near their home when Izuku was only about 9 years old. So now he was living in an orphanage all alone because of the fact that nobody even cared about him in that place. They never really fed him unless he did so himself or when he cooked for everyone in the place. So here he was walking up to the very church that he grew up going to. He never knew that this place was so comforting until he was around 10 years old when he ran away from Kacchan to escape from a horrible beating. He still got said beating, but it allowed him a reprieve from all the bullying, suicide-baited notes left in his lockers, and of course the red spider lilies he finds in his desk itself. Entering the church, he noticed that the people inside were preparing for a mass that afternoon as he looked over at their confession stand and made his way to the admittedly small line. I guess that there aren't as many people wanting to see confess their issues. Izuku muttered to himself as he got into line. Once it was his turn, Izuku, who was literally the last person in line as time had passed enough to where he was the last person inside the church, had entered the confession stand. Taking a seat in his spot, he never noticed how a fresh scent entered the small area until he heard the sound of a door closing on the opposite end. "What do you have to confess, young man?" a feminine voice asked as Izuku thought about his answer. There was a lot of things he could say to answer the woman, but a question was the only thing he could come up with. Is it really a good idea to kill oneself?" Izuku asked as a tight feeling started to build up in his chest. "Why bring this up, child?" the woman asked. I've been bullied, abused, and downright tortured because of a silly diagnosis I had when I was 4. Izuku said as he tried to gather more of his thoughts. As the tightness continued until Izuku could feel himself crying, he continued on telling the woman about his plights, as well as the troubles he goes through on a daily basis. "Ever since my diagnosis, I've been nothing but a punching bag meant for quirk practice. I get suicide bait letters in my notebooks, locker, desk. I even was told to kill myself by someone who I thought could return back to the person I used to know when I was little. I had waited for 10 long years for that day to come and it still hasn't arrived yet. I know that he can become a great hero, but it's his actions that worry me," Izuku said as the woman stayed silent to listen more to what he said. But I want to know. Is it really okay to kill oneself? Because the entire way here that's what has been on my mind the entire time," Izuku said as he sobbed full-heartedly now. At this point the woman was at a loss for words. This boy, who seems to just be the nicest person she could be around just from his aura alone, was subjected to such plights as well as torture. She needed to pull him from this place in order to save him. But she really needed to make sure that everyone at the place she was wanting to take him knew about it. "Wait here, little one, I will be right back. And maybe have an answer for you," the woman said as Izuku couldn't help but ask one more question. What is your end name?" Izuku asked as the woman smiled through the small slit of the confession stand. "My name is Gabriel and I hope to help you with your plight," the woman said as she left the confession stand. Once she left the boy to his devices, she entered a small room where she started to use something that looked similar to a quirk but wasn't. As the small circle with weird markings appeared next to her ear, she waited for the person on the other end to answer. "What is it, Gabriel? Do you need something?" an incredibly soft male voice asked. "Brother, do you have an answer to what I'm about to show you via recording?" Gabriel asked as she sent the recording of her talk with the boy to the man on the other end. A few minutes passed by without an answer as there was a grunt of slight anger coming from the opposing end of the call. "Damn it, bring him to 7th heaven. If he doesn't wish to be alive, we must make sure that he can live amongst us. Do you have all the information about him within your magical abilities?" the man asked. "His name is Midoriya Izuku, he is an orphan. He has no quirk and he has a high magical presence from just the small meeting I had with him. Please, I wish to help the boy before he gains even more darkness in his heart," Gabriel said as she pleaded with her brother. "Bring him here and I will gauge whether or not he will be fit for our program. We should really thank Surziches for giving us the schematics for evil pieces so we could create our card system," the man said as he hung up on the magic call. With that all said and done, Gabriel walked out of the small room as she made her way back to where Izuku was seen last. Izuku sat in his seat for a few minutes as he waited for the woman, Gabriel, his mind recollected, to return. It wasn't much longer before he heard the sounds of knocking on his door of the confession stand that he exited the small compartment and looked at the woman who spoke to him. She was taller than he was, but not by much. She had long beautiful blonde hair, as well as extremely beautiful jade green eyes, as well as a very voluptuous form. Are YUGG Gabriel-san? Izuku asked, as the woman smiled and nodded. Young man, could you come with me really quick? I would like you to meet someone, he might be able to answer your question better than I could. Gabriel said, as she smiled down to him. Following her like a small duckling would its parent, Izuku followed her to the back room of the church, where he found a small room as the woman stood in the middle of it. Looking around the place, he found himself in awe of how it looked so small but minimalistic compared to the church room itself. But it wasn't much longer before he felt a small pain in the back of his neck, knocking him unconscious. When he came to, he found himself in the arms of a now much taller Gabriel as she walked through a big white space. He felt so safe in the woman's arms, but at the same time, she was seemingly giving him a warmth that he never felt ever since his mother was still alive. But his reminiscence was over when they reached a massive door which was open from the inside, revealing an equally tall man with long blonde hair with teal-colored eyes looking at a massive console. Ah. Gabriel, you have brought our guest who seems to be enjoying his place in your arms. The man said, but there was something he noticed about the man. His 12 big golden wings that fluttered about behind him as he walked, it was amazing to see a man with that many wings on his back. Hello there Midoriya Izuku. My name is Michiel, I know that this seems to be a bit confusing, but please sit down at the table. Michiel said, as he sat down in a chair. Once Gabriel placed Izuku on his own feet, the boy looked around the place before sitting down, looking for potential exits for him to take in order to escape. The panicked looks he had didn't go unnoticed by his peers as they sat down and placed themselves in a position that was as non-threatening as possible. Alright young man, you wanted to have an answer to your admittedly dark question, no? Michiel asked, as Izuku looked back at the man with sad eyes and nodding. Well young man, who made you think like this? Just so I can have an idea as to what you are experiencing. Michiel said, as Izuku looked at him confusedly. Why your wings aren't that of a Q quirk? Why you really are Michiel T the Archangel of H Heaven aren't you? Izuku asked, in awe but slight fear. Yes, I am an Archangel of Heaven. But please can you answer my question? Michiel asked, in a soft tone. Trembling slightly, Izuku told the man about his life growing up, as well as the abuse, torture, as well as mental anguish he underwent during the 10 long years since his quirkless diagnosis. And it was slowly becoming very evident to Michiel that this boy was literally on the cusp of giving up on a life which everyone could do better through their actions. Well young man, I believe that everything that happened to you should never had happened in the first place. Michiel said, as Izuku looked at him in confusion as well as alarm. What do you mean Michiel-san? Izuku asked, fearfully. Izuku, your life is precious to any and all those who worry about you. Yes, there is nobody who cares about you right now. But what about the future? You might meet a woman or man in the future who you will come to love, and they would return your feelings no matter your quirkless nature. So what I say right now that you should have never been hurt the way you were, was completely wrong. So I am here to give you an opportunity. Michiel said, as Izuku looked at him confused. We have a way for it to look like you had died to the world, but you could still watch over someone. You could be a hero, but have the power to show it as well. Do you wish to become an angel of God? Michiel asked, as Izuku sat there for a moment thinking. It was a really good deal, he could essentially fake his own death and sign himself up under a new alias in order to continue living on in the human world like he did normally. As he was thinking over the choice, Gabriel spoke up as she looked Izuku in the eyes about what the choice he was making really was for. Izuku, with you joining our ranks, you would have to make sure that you stay pure of heart. You cannot have any perverse thoughts that cause you to act on impulses of a lecherous man. You must keep your heart from straying from the path of a fallen angel, meaning you cannot fall for someone through a lust of the moment. If you truly wish to copulate with another, it has to be the one you truly and dearly love. Gabriel said, as Izuku was placed in a thought bubble in his own mind. It was moving at millions of times the speed of light in order to come up with an answer to Michiel's question. It was here that he opened his mouth to ask one last question. What happens if I say yes to this? Izuku asked, as Michiel looked at him with a smile. You will undergo a process of becoming one of our cards within our saint system. We will give you a card based on the set whether or not you become a part of a certain suit for a card. Michiel said, as Izuku thought about the card games that pro players use. So your saint system is based entirely on a deck of cards. Spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. Izuku asked, as Michiel and Gabriel smiled down to him with a nod. As Izuku thought more about this, he sighed as he looked up at them, before smiling towards them. See, could I become an angel of H hearts? Izuku asked, as Michiel looked at Gabriel with a smirk. Why you really wish to work under me? Gabriel asked, blushing. I felt that H hearts was the perfect place to be because all I've ever wanted was to become a hero. It was as if it was ingrained into my own heart. It's all I ever wanted to be, and it will be what I always want to become. If you'd have me of C course. Izuku said, as Gabriel stood up and moved over to the boy. Almost instantly Izuku held his head in his arms as he awaited the attack to happen, and as soon as Izuku put his arms down from his fear of being attacked by the angel next to him, he felt her pull him into the warmest hug he had ever received since his mother had last been alive. I'd love to be your king. Gabriel said, as Izuku started to break down into tears. Michiel saw it fit that he makes himself scarce as he left Izuku and Gabriel with one another as the woman hugged Izuku tight in her embrace. The boy felt the warmth of the woman as he slowly wrapped his arms around her, as he felt the tightness feeling in his chest start to burst, as he started to sob even more as Gabriel rubbed his back. He would stay in her arms like that for a while, as his tears would continue to come out as he thought about the last time his mother gave him a hug. The look on his face showed true sadness as he looked out on the plain of white that he could see, and a small vestige of his mother appeared although flickering. Flashback. Izuku and Inko were walking on the other side of town. This was around 4 years ago when Izuku was 9 years old. They were having fun talking to one another. It was a beautiful day as they hugged one another with happy smiles on their faces. The looks on their faces were that of an extremely happy family, and like nothing would ever make their day bad. They had entered a convenience store as they bought some supplies for their dinner for that day, before leaving the place with a happy smile, as Inko smiled down at her son. He really was the light of the woman's world as his happiness made her own much better, but she had noticed her son's smiles becoming more and more strained. Pulling her son to an amusement park nearby, they got on the Ferris wheel and were moving towards the now crimson-colored sky as the sun was lowering over the horizon. Izuku honey, is there anything you want to tell me about? Inko asked, looking at her son with her smile. What are you talking about mommy? Izuku asked as he looked into her eyes. Her dark green eyes had stared into his slightly dull emerald eyes as the mother pulled her son into her arms unknowingly for the last time in her life. Izuku my baby. You can tell mommy what is wrong, you're not going to get in trouble. Inko said, softly as he hugged Izuku tight to her chest as the boy's tears started to flow. K-K-Kacchan's been mean to everyone. He's being mean to everyone else, but he beats me down every day mommy. I don't know how to get help. I don't want to disturb your time from work. I'm sorry you had to deal with a quirkless Deku like me. I promise I will get better. Izuku said as he cried in his mother's arms. Inko had started to cry as well as she heard Izuku talk about what Katsuki had done to him in excruciating detail. Especially at what he had done to him recently. As they hugged one another once more, Inko made sure to keep her son there the entire time as she placed as much love as well as care into it. Izuku, in the event that I am no longer with you, I want you to remember what I say here. You know that God watches over us, right? Inko asked as Izuku looked up into his mother's tear-filled eyes and nodded. Well, that is because of the fact that he sends his angels to look over us. Those angels make sure that we are safe from any harm that would do us in. Those angels, his children, make us feel safe the more we believe in them. It is our mission to become like them. Promise me that when the time comes that if I'm long gone, you become mommy's little angel. Inko asked as Izuku looked into her eyes again before nodding. I promise mommy. I will become the best angel that you'd ever see. And you won't be gone before that happens. Izuku said as the memory faded into darkness as it changed to what happened immediately after that moment. The amusement park was covered in ash clouds as well as broken down rides. Izuku was looking around the place for his mother. Villains had attacked the place, hoping to make a quick buck, and Izuku had been separated from his mother in the ensuing chaos. Running around as fast as his little legs could go, Izuku soon found his mother hiding behind a wall as she looked over at him. Running over to him, she pulled him into what would become the last love-filled hug the boy would have for over 4 years. As she ran through the smoke, none of the two even realized that the villains who were attacking took notice of them and went to attack. Inko noticed something in the view nearby and saw that it was a stray mirror from the mirror attraction and found the villain aiming their weapon at her. Pulling Izuku into her chest as best as she could to shield him from the incoming attack, she whispered some words into Izuku's ears as the attack came in the form of a massive plasma blast. Don't worry Izuku, mommy's here. Mommy will protect you. Inko said as her body burned from the attack. Mommy? Izuku asked as he saw the pain in his mother's eyes as their light was slowly being lost. Izuku, remember our promise on the Ferris wheel? Inko asked as the blast subsided. The woman's strength was slowly dropping from what she had before the blast hit her. Her body just couldn't take anything more as she had been losing too much blood. Why yes mommy. Please don't leave me. Izuku screamed as she collapsed on the ground next to him. Izuku pushed her limp body as she stared at him with tear-filled eyes. Izuku, you will become my little angel. Inko said, as she let out one last pain-filled smile and breath of air, pulling Izuku into one final hug. It was in that moment that Izuku felt all the warmth that his mother brought with every hug she gave him just disappear into a cold empty hug. Muumi, Izuku screamed out as tears came out in treasure troves. After the moment Izuku had with Gabriel, she had shown him to a small room where there was a giant bed sitting in the far corner of the room. Izuku had stopped crying at this point as he got control over his emotions, enough to be coherent about his words. Looking about the admittedly small room but much larger than the orphanage's basement room for him, he smiled at how there was so many calming aspects of it. Thank you for stopping me. I don't know what I would have done had I not gone to the sea church, Gabriel-sama. Izuku said, as Gabriel smiled down at Izuku. Don't worry Izuku, we will make sure that you are prepared to start your new job as a new angel within our ranks. I can certainly thank Surziches for his assistance in making our saint system, it helped us greatly. Gabriel said, as Izuku was looking confusedly at her. Surziches? Who is that? Izuku asked, as Gabriel smiled down towards him. He is the ultimate ruler of the underworld's version of hell. He controls the lands that the devils, who are our natural enemies, and makes the laws for those who are under him in terms of rank. Gabriel said, as they both continued to talk. Their conversation eventually went over to one of Izuku's favorite pastimes, quirks, as the woman had asked him what he believes is the real reason that humanity had gained their supernatural abilities. From what I believe, quirks just appeared as the next stage of evolution for everyone in the world, starting from a baby who could glow, that was recorded at least. After that, many others around the world started to record people appearing with these abilities as young as 4 but no older. I'm not certain, but some people believe that they were birthed from a small disease that encountered the world. But there is one theory that my mom came up with that she truly and wholeheartedly thought was true. Izuku said, as a straight tear showed up on his eye. Gabriel sat down and allowed Izuku to sit next to her as she wiped a stray tear from his eye as she smiled down at him. What was that theory? She asked, kindly. She believed that God saw us fight to learn how to defend ourselves with the power he bestowed upon us. She said that God wanted us to be similar to his own creations that protect heaven, at least in our own ways. Izuku said, as Gabriel laughed. Haha. I can't believe that she was that close. Gabriel said, after having a laugh at Izuku's theory that he gained from his mother. What do you mean my mom was close? Izuku asked, as Gabriel sighed. My father was a man of few words, but when he did speak he would always talk about humans. About how he wished they could develop powers similar to magic, especially out of a comic book he read from that one human, I believe his name is Stan Lee. Gabriel said, as Izuku smiled. Wow, so God created quirks in order to make Stan Lee's creations come true? Izuku asked, as Gabriel smiled at him before nodding. Got it in one, father had met Stan Lee when the man had died about 400 years ago, and he heard the man state that he would love to have seen superpowers around during his day, so father decided to make his wish a reality. In essence, Stan Lee is the sole creator of quirks as a whole. Gabriel said, as Izuku started to laugh as well. For Gabriel it was the most beautiful laugh in the world. She patted the boy's head as he seemingly leaned into the touch before controlling himself. Sorry, but that was kind of funny. An old man from before the quirk era, being the father of quirks. Izuku said, chuckling. I know I laughed as well when my brother asked father his own question you humans had been asking yourselves. Gabriel said, before standing up and reaching into her generous bust, causing Izuku to look away with a blush on his face. Izuku Midoriya, would you like to become one of my brave saints? Gabriel asked, with a serious face as Izuku schooled his own features. I will with all my heart and soul, work my hardest to become one of your best angels, Lady Gabriel. And I hope to make both you and my mother proud of what I do. Izuku said, as Gabriel nodded before pulling a card from random. As soon as she pulled out the card from her suit she smiled down at the card as she placed it on Izuku's chest as she opened her mouth. Izuku Midoriya, welcome to the brave saints of hearts. Your designation is that of ace. Gabriel said, smiling down at Izuku. Once the card was stated and Izuku nodded his head, his whole body glowed a bright golden color as his body was entirely enveloped in the glow. Gabriel could only see a small silhouette from the boy inside the glow as his form got just a bit taller, now up to her waist in height, but once his back started to push back, she watched as 2 pairs of wings pushed out of his back. Once the glow died down, Izuku stood in front of Gabriel within a new set of clothes compared to his entirely black Gakurin from Aldera High School. As Izuku held his eyes closed, Gabriel asked him to open his eyes, and once he did, she truly wished she hadn't, as one of his beautiful emerald orbs had been replaced with a silver eye. Something she had never seen before from her brave saints, so calling her brother to see what happened, he arrived as fast as possible. You're telling me that he gained the silver eye just from absorbing the ace from your suit? Michiel asked, as he studied Izuku's new angelic form. His four wings fluttered behind him, glowing a beautiful emerald green as they flinched whenever Michiel touched them softly. Apparently Izuku was extremely sensitive whenever someone touched them, and Michiel made sure to keep his hands away from them as much as possible. Izuku, I will need you to focus your power into your hands. If you can summon something, we might find out why you are having a singular silver eye. Gabriel said, as she started to feel something akin to a sacred gear once Izuku's power was revealed to them. As soon as that was heard, Izuku had felt inside of him in search of something that seemingly didn't belong, but was attached to him, and he found it not long after as he summoned it forth. Once a silver glow appeared from his left hand, a long spear came out of it until it reached its maximum length. It was revealed to be the true Longinus, a sacred gear that God had created for his son Jesus Christ, in order to use against any foe who went against the Christian pantheon. Unfortunately, it was also what done the young angel in when he had become a part of God's angelic force of angels. As Michiel and Gabriel looked at the sacred gear in question, that was when Izuku's eye changed back into its original emerald color once more. So you had the true Longinus spear. I can't believe that its wielder is an angel once more. I wish I could see how you are trained with it, but I have other business to deal with. If you have the true Longinus, the original wielder of the spear is now dead. Michiel said, as he left the room. Placing the spear in the cabinet behind himself, Izuku looked at the concerned at the now slightly saddened Gabriel, as he walked over to her. Lady Gabriel. Hey, are you okay? Izuku asked, worriedly. I'm fine, Izuku, it's just that spear gave me a lot of memories about Jesus. He was my little brother, and to see the weapon that he used in your hands, it saddens me that he was killed by his own weapon. Gabriel said, before shaking her head and leading him outside the small room. Izuku was now feeling self-conscious about the large A on his chest, as he for some reason managed to subconsciously use magic in order to place a new shirt over his torso. And admittedly it was a shirt that made Gabriel laugh a little with how blunt it was. Its stated t-shirt on the shirt itself. HM. You have your own way with your humor, Izuku, now it's time for you to meet my other saints. Gabriel said, as Izuku followed after her. They walked around until they arrived at a small clearing where two angels were training with one another. One had long blue hair, as well as a serious expression on her face. The other woman looked Russian in body type as well as looks, as she had medium-length blonde hair, as well as Prussian blue eyes. They took notice of the two arrivals as they stopped their training and looking over at them, and for some reason Izuku felt himself get a little bit scared of their looks and hid behind Gabriel's legs as a young child with their parent. Gabriel-sama. What brings you here? Did you bring another angel with you? The blue-haired woman angel asked as the blonde-haired one moved to look behind Gabriel. Who are you, little one? The woman asked as Izuku visibly became more and more red in the face. Griselda, Marana, this is your new brave saint junior. His name is Midoriya Izuku, his rank amongst you all is ace. I hope you all learn to get along with one another. Gabriel said as she stepped out of the way as Izuku's form was shown to Griselda. Both girls looked down to him as Izuku now felt a little sad that he was so short compared to these two women. Hello. And nice to meet you senpai. Izuku said, bowing towards them. At least he has some manners, could do without the stuttering though. We will have to work on that. Griselda said as she smirked at the boy who could only gulp at the meaning. I can't wait to see what comes of this one. Will he fall into the ranks of the fallen angels or will he become a seraph like Gabriel-sama? Marana said as she danced around the boy unaware that her chest was making him look there without being capable of looking away. Alright you two, stop teasing the poor boy, his wings are already turning black. Gabriel said, pouting at the two's antics. Griselda, I need you to train him in martial arts as well as weapons mastery in the spear. He has a sacred gear that is the true Longinus. He will need to be prepared for anything for if he wishes to return to the human world. Gabriel said as Griselda gained a serious look on her face. How hard do you want me to train him, Gabriel-sama? Griselda asked as she gained a smirk on her face. Test the waters for what he can handle, then you can go all in for his training. As for you, Marana, you need to make sure that you don't get him too excited, we can't risk him falling so soon. Gabriel said as Marana pouted before nodding. Come on Runt, we need to find your affinity for magic. Griselda said as Izuku followed behind the woman like a duckling would a mother duck. Once the two were gone, Marana looked at Gabriel before asking a question that was on her mind ever since she had seen the boy. Gabriel-sama, why was he looking so sad? Marana asked as Gabriel sighed. Marana, that boy has gone through so much on Earth. But he still holds his own love for the planet as well as its people, no matter what they had done to him for the betterment of 10 years. Gabriel said as she let out a small tear. What did they do to him if he was that sad? Marana asked, looking at the young angel's disappearing form towards the weapons rooms. They bullied, belittled, abused as well as mentally abused him to the point he was literally one step away from ending it all. I never like having to see father's children ending their own lives before they can truly begin, even when that boy had a massive future ahead of himself of becoming the greatest hero the world had ever seen. But because he never went down into that underpass that day, he never would become that for himself. But that's okay, we will prepare him for going to UA, that is the school he wishes to go to. Gabriel said, as Mirana nodded her head. We will make sure that he is fully trained for this UA school. Where is it located in? Mirana asked, as Gabriel smiled. In the territory of Amaterasu, the young man had been an avid Catholic Christian, all because his mother was entirely religious to our cause, but kept an open mind to those of different religions. Gabriel said, before leaving. I see, well I will make sure that his training schedule is made by tomorrow. Mirana called out before leaving. Gabriel watched as Izuku was twirling a spear around like he would a stick before dropping it as she giggled a little. This one angel would be her passion until she found a new one, and then he would be the senior angel to that one and train them. She couldn't wait for his evolution into the supernatural world and how strong he could become in the future. Over the coming months, Izuku would be seen training extremely hard until he was fit to drop under Griselda's rule. The woman herself was surprised by his endurance as well as pain tolerance, as the young man took any damage she dished out and would attempt to counter with a tremendous attack that costed him his strength. Every time the young boy would attempt to make a new counter to her attack style, she would smile as his analytical mind would take over as he analyzed her every move with those emerald orbs he called eyes. Over the next 3 months they spent training Izuku in how to learn offensive and defensive martial arts within the supernatural world and combined them with human martial arts to make it seem he had some kind of martial prowess. They would do the same katas over and over again until they were mere muscle memory before moving on to another new set that he would do like muscle memory before combining them into what would become his new fighting style. Even Griselda was completely taken aback when she found Izuku leaning more into Krav Maga, as that fighting style was more of a jack of all trades kind of martial arts. She smiled when she knew what he was going for when leaning towards it. He was already learning how to make it to where he could introduce a weapon into the fighting style, changing it altogether. It was here for the next few months that she would train the boy in the martial art style and combine his spear training just to make sure he could use his sacred gear with the style. They would keep this up for around 5 months, leaving only about 2 months before the UA University entrance exams, and Griselda came up to the boy at this point as he was seen training in the training field of heaven as the woman watched from afar. Izuku, do you have any plans on going to UA University? Griselda asked as Izuku stopped his training. As much as I would love to go there, I don't think I should. Izuku said, as that confused the woman greatly. Why is that? She asked, as Izuku looked downright fearful as he thought about who would be going there. I don't want T to go somewhere that someone like Itsuki would be going. Especially since UA will make sure to show him that his way of thinking will be T turned up on its own head. I would like to go to a different school if that is alright. Izuku said, as Griselda thought about it. Well, I guess I could try and get you into the Kuo Academy through Gabriel Sama's word alone. But that might be a while before that can happen. Griselda said, as Izuku nodded. In the meantime, I would like to train until I can watch over some of the people in Japan. I want to make sure that I can protect others so long as they don't know who I am. Izuku said, as Griselda nodded and rubbed his head. Well, far be it from me to make sure that you aren't ready. In terms of physical training, you are good for now, but you will need to learn more about magic from Mirana, she is the magic nerd like you. Griselda said, as Izuku nodded and left the training field in order to find the young woman. I hope you will be able to heal your own heart, Izuku. All this training has done good in order to distract you from your pain. I hope with Mirana you can find a way to heal your own mental pain. Griselda muttered to herself as she looked down at the earth. While Izuku was walking through second heaven in order to find Mirana, Griselda walked up toward seventh heaven, where the leaders of heaven as a whole were conversing to one another about future endeavors. She had knocked on the door, gaining the attention of Gabriel, who had opened the door to let her in. Griselda, what brings you here? We were in the middle of a discussion about what we should do for Izuku to bring him at least some closure. Gabriel said, as Griselda smiled. Izuku has made his choice about schooling. He doesn't wish to go to UA anymore, mainly because of the fact that he doesn't wish to go to a school environment where Katsuki Bakugo lives in. Griselda said, as Gabriel grimaced. She had forgotten about that specific problem for Izuku. In the last few months of training with the boy, they had been great. Unless they brought Bakugo from his past in which he would start to hyperventilate and lash out with his powers on accident. It appeared the boy had a fear of Bakugo still and would need to learn that he was already far surpassing the boy. They gained an idea that would help them all out, and Gabriel looked at Griselda as she came up with a plan. In order for Izuku to overcome his fear of this Bakugo Katsuki, we will need to find a way for them to clash without Izuku becoming more and more fearful of the young man. And I have the perfect way for that to happen. Gabriel said, as she smiled sadly at Griselda. Izuku had found Mirana as the young woman had been looking at some certain magic spells in order to master them all for later. Mirana-senpai. See, can you teach me how to use magic? Izuku asked as the girl looked over at him. Grabbing the 16-year-old boy by the cheek and pinching them, she gushed about him before dragging him over to the training field he had just left as she went to get some magic spells. Once she returned with the magic spell books, she taught him how to use certain magic spells in order to heal others, as well as protect them with spells like Nature Barrier and Nature's Healing. She had gone for a nature's theme for the boy in terms of magic, since the boy's hair and eyes were the color that nature took place in for most countries. For the next 2 months the boy would learn both defensive and offensive magic in the form of light magic, as well as earth magic, so that he could control the ground he could stand on with just a mere flick of his wrist. Once the training was complete, Izuku was approached by Griselda for his final day of physical training. He had to face the horrors of his own past. Defeat the one who placed him on the path of an angel in order to fully defeat his own inner demons. Izuku, your goal for today is to defeat Katsuki Bakugo, who will be at his best in terms of future self. He will be in his adult pro-hero form, where he stays the same in terms of fighting style, quirk abilities, as well as his aggressive nature. Your goal in this physical training is to overcome your fear of the young man and show him that you are no longer tethered to him being your bully anymore. Got it? Griselda asked, as Izuku nodded. Izuku entered the training arena as he found Katsuki in his adult form glaring at him with his hands popping with his quirk active. Wow Deku, it seems like you've gotten stronger than I last seen you. I can't wait to show you your place once more, underneath my foot. Bakugo said, launching towards the boy as Izuku gained a slightly fearful and passive stance. As Bakugo neared, Izuku kept his eyes trained on the adult as the man reared his right arm for a massive right hook. As Bakugo's fist came barreling towards Izuku's face, the boy had dodged over to the left as he swung his left fist towards the incoming face of the boy who had overextended his attack. As soon as his fist met the adult version of Bakugo's face as he was lifted even higher in the air from the attack, he was sent back towards the other side of the arena as Izuku started to float into the air. So you have a quirk now, Deku? That won't save you from me, you villainous bastard. Bakugo said as he attacked once more with more aggression. Izuku dodged each and every attack as he used quirkless fighting of Krav Maga in order to take the boy's attack style down extremely fast. With each attack that was used against the much older Bakugo, each strike was much harder than the original, as the older man had struggled to move out of the way, especially with his quirk, in order to make sure no damage was dealt to him. Both then eventually clashed in the middle of the air as Izuku had his arm crossed with Bakugo's own arm as they glared into one another's eyes. Swinging his left wing over to Bakugo, he had smacked him in a different direction as he skidded across the ground. Jumping up from the ground, he ran over to Izuku as the boy had pulled out his true long ina spear as he twirled it around in the air as he swung the blunt end of the spear into the young man's abdomen, causing him to throw up spittle before sending the boy into the air. Izuku stared into the sky as he glared at how Bakugo was now spinning in the air with a new move that Izuku suspected the boy would be capable of using at some point in the training he would receive in UA. Preparing himself for the strength of this attack as Izuku took in a deep breath, and for some reason, green electricity had prepared itself around himself. It was something new about him that whenever he increased his speed, green sparks of lightning would move about him when he used a higher portion of his power. Moving from the ground and flying towards Bakugo's floating form in the sky, they both increased their speed in order to land one last decisive strike on the other in order to defeat one another. Izuku placed even more power into his next strike as he only thought of purifying the evil in Bakugo's heart. And once he was in front of the young man who placed his palms outward towards the young man, Izuku grimaced as he felt the incoming heat from the quirk of Bakugo as he thrusted his spear straight at Bakugo as the young man felt the spear pierce through his chest. As soon as the explosions from his palms were now slowly disappearing, Izuku's form was shown to the young man as he stared at him as Izuku glared at the boy before returning a soft look at the young man. I'm sorry, Bakugo. I know that you didn't want to have your life ended this way, so I am taking all the evil out of your heart and replacing it with something pure, innocent. Izuku said as he had the spear put his feelings into the attack as Bakugo's body was covered in a white glow as the young man growled out in pain before his visage had disappeared in the air. I'm sorry, you damn nerd. The young man said as soon as his body disappeared with regret in his tone. Once Izuku was in the air speaking to the Bakugo lookalike, Griselda had watched the interaction as a smile made its way into her features. She then watched as Izuku's pure white glow had then been pushed into Bakugo's body as it slowly but surely started to overflow with innocence as well as kindness as the boy started to disappear. She could barely lip-read the young man apologizing to Izuku as the small smile on her face turned into an even bigger one. I'm sure that Izuku would love to have his apology made to him by the real Bakugo though. Griselda said, as she looked down at a certain Class 1 entering the USJ, only for them all to be attacked. Looks like that class will need a certain angel in order to keep them safe from any and all harm. Griselda muttered to herself as Izuku made his way over to her. How was my final lesson? Izuku asked, as Griselda put her magic away as she smiled down at Izuku. I think you're ready for your first mission as an angel. You need to save this class from certain doom, keep these students within Class 1 as safe from any and all harm. But make sure that they only see you once, that way you don't tip off that the supernatural world is real to them. Griselda said, as Izuku nodded. Looking at the specific students on the list, he couldn't help but smile at how Bakugo was not on the list, but he knew that he couldn't let a grudge keep him from protecting that boy from harm as well. Activating a magic circle, Izuku had disappeared from heaven, just as Mirana had arrived in the area in order to inform Izuku about his next lesson with magic. Hey Griselda, you know where Izuku is? I was going to teach him a useful defensive spell. Mirana asked, as Griselda showed her a small orb that showed Izuku appearing high above the students in the USJ. He is going to save a class as well as their teachers from an attack of villains. His goal: protect the students from any and all harm. He is going to become a guardian angel for them as well as their sister class. Griselda said, as she smiled down at the image below. Izuku appeared high above the students, as the villains hadn't taken notice of his presence in the USJ. Stretching his body, he thought about how the villains who would be the most problematic for the school, as he kept an eye on the mist villain who appeared in front of the students. He took notice of the collar on the villain immediately, as he made sure to have more of the students take notice of it, with some observation magic being placed into the minds of the students. Once they all noticed the clear and obvious weakness of the villain, they all charged the villain with the hero with them. But the other villains down below, he watched as his favorite underground hero Racerhead was fighting a horde of villains on his own and decided to show his presence to them all down there. Aizawa Shota was a man of logic as well as heroism. He was reliant purely on potential of those he taught and wouldn't allow them a single day of laziness. But as soon as he was about to be pierced through the back with a weapon from a villain who caught him off guard, he prepared for his inevitable death when he heard a clang behind himself as he looked at what blocked the blade. You know, attacking this man is not okay. I'm sure that he should live for the simple fact that he is a true hero. The voice said, as Aizawa finally took in the glowing person behind himself. Who are you? Are you another villain? The man asked, concerned. I'm a mere ally. I am here to keep you and your students from certain death. Your students are safe after all at the moment. I can see them fighting villains across the entire building. Your training of them is bearing its fruit, but we should focus on our own problems, sir. The young voice said, as Aizawa had finally took in the young angelic person's aura as well as looks. It was a young boy who was the same age as his students, and his face looked so pure and innocent as he stared at the villain surrounding him and the boy. Well, if you can handle yourself, I won't arrest you for vigilantism. At least you don't hide your face. Aizawa said, as Izuku chuckled. I'm not a vigilante, villain, nor hero. Just a kid who wishes to do right by the things that have been done to me. The boy said, before they both took on the horde together. They fought through the villains at a much faster pace, but more controlled since Aizawa was able to keep his timer on his eyes, being able to be used much longer than usual. Which definitely caused the villain leader of the attack to look angered by the appearance of the young boy. As soon as the battle with the villain horde was completed, both the boy and Aizawa stared at the last two villains, as well as the reappeared mist villain who looked worse for wear. I have successfully dispersed the hero students across the entire building, but I had accidentally allowed one to escape my reach, Tamura Shigaraki. The mist villain said, as he struggled to breathe right. So your name is Tamura Shigaraki, and from what I can see your quirk seems to be destructive with those gloves you have. The young boy beside Aizawa deduced. Wow, you really know your quirks. You're right though, my quirk allows me to decay anything I touch, and you both are going to be next. The villain said, running over to the duo. The young boy revealed his four wings as he took to the sky in order to dodge the attack at him, whilst Aizawa had wrapped the villain's arm up to the wrist with his scarf before throwing the villain over towards the other two villains who remained. If you know what you're doing, what do you think you can do against that big monster kid? Aizawa asked as he watched the boy look closely at the creature. That thing was created from dead human bodies, not only that, but seems to be made of different quirks, most likely shock absorption, regeneration from the scars, as well as strength enhancements. This is something that only I can handle. The boy said, as he touched down placing his wings back inside his back. Take on the decay quirk user, break his hands to where they can't be used or take of a finger. The mist villain only needs his collar removed before he will be unconscious. The boy said, as both attacked their respective villains. Kurajiri, have the Nomu kill the brat. Shigaraki called out before clashing with Aizawa. It was around this time that certain students would arrive at the main plaza, where the duo were fighting their respective villains, as Izuku noticed that there was a girl and boy in the water with another person with them. They had short brown hair and a bob cut, as well as a blush on their cheeks, but Izuku felt several presences inside of her. As Izuku focused his gaze on the villain he was fighting, Izuku noticed how the villain would always focus on prioritizing his master than Izuku himself, which allowed him to throw his spear at the decay quirk user. As soon as the spear was about to pierce through the villain's lower abdomen, the bird villain had appeared just in time to block the hit as it pierced through its own abdomen. Izuku allowed the spear's presence inside the bird villain to glow even more as Izuku powered up his magical energy to cause the beast to writhe in pain, as well as flail around as Izuku stepped up to it before placing his hand on the villain's face. Causing all who had stopped their fight to watch what the boy was about to do look on in horror as Izuku started to power up. I'm sorry to the bodies that make up this horrible form, you all must be looking to God for help in escaping this torment. I will make sure you all enter heaven with peace of mind as well as body. Izuku said, before his magic had reached its maximum, which was far higher than the Nomu's. Everyone watched as the Nomu had started to glow ominously white as Izuku muttered words that Aizawa could only hear. Purge. Izuku said, as the Nomu started to be lifted into the air as it was completely disintegrated from seemingly existence. Once the light ended, the students watched as the dead bodies of the original owners of the monster's quirks had appeared on the ground with lifeless eyes as Izuku placed his hand on each and every one of them. You all deserve a much better death than this, those who caused this will never find themselves entering heaven. Of that I will make sure of. The boy muttered to the bodies before using his magic to teleport them away. Looking over at the completely bewildered villain, Izuku glared at the villain with blue scraggly hair as he made his way over. What in the fuck did you just do to my Nomu? Shigaraki screamed out as he scratched his neck in fury. I merely gave them the piece of death that they should have gotten. I could sense the sadness as well as pain they were going through having their bodies merged like that. Izuku said as he made it in front of the villain's face. You are going to leave here and leave this class and their sister class alone for the duration of their time in this school. And you will not have your face be seen nearby them, or else what I just did to them will be you, but you will be going to the endless torture of hell. Izuku said as the villain looked at Izuku's emerald orbs for eyes. That kind of power had to have been a fluke. There is no way that you are still capable of fighting after using a power enough to defeat All Might. Shigaraki said as he went to attack Izuku. Only for the boy to slam the much taller and deadlier man into the ground with his arms poised to attack himself with his own quirk. You really want to test that theory that I am weaker after defeating your little Nomu? Izuku asked in the ear of the villain. Izuku's wings were out for display now as his emerald wings were fluttering behind himself, and as soon as the villain nodded his head, Izuku tossed the villain at the mist villain before they took their abrupt leave. Looking at the other hero students who arrived as well as Aizawa walking over to him, Izuku suddenly got subconscious about how he looked before disappearing in a magic circle. Unknown to him, a certain ash blonde-haired boy had leapt over to where he once was looking lost as he screamed out in fury. Damn it, Deku. As soon as Izuku returned back to heaven, he saw that Griselda's face was turned into a frown as she looked at the orb in her hands. I'm sorry for failing your mission you gave me. Izuku said as he bowed to Griselda as the woman looked at him. At least they think that the angelic powers you have is a quirk alone. But make sure that you don't show them anything that resides within the supernatural world. If they find out about it, you will be in serious trouble. Griselda said as Izuku nodded. They continued with teaching Izuku some magic lessons so that he could fight in long range as well, since they were needed in order to protect himself against foes who could attack at range in the supernatural world. They would continue on this lesson for a few days within heaven as they prepared for the next mission for Izuku. What they didn't know was that the mission he would be sent out on would be coming in faster than one would think. As a dark-powered fallen angel had stolen some artifacts from the Catholic Church within the Vatican, as Michiel was struggling to find someone who could assist some of the Catholic servants going to Kuo Town in order to bring them back. Michiel could only think of one person who could go into Kuo without causing a ruckus amongst his own faction, and only one person who came to mind was the newest member of their faction, Midoriya Izuku. A young man turned angel all because of things that happened to him, because humanity can just be a cruel woman sometimes. I need to make sure that Gabriel doesn't kill me for sending her ace with Zenobia as well as Arena on their journey to bring back Excalibur pieces back within the church's hands. Michiel said as he released a sigh of sadness. He didn't want the boy's first true mission to be so soon after he saved a class of hero students from death, but his interference from the USJ had caused some of the humans on Earth to think this was an act of God coming in to protect them all from harm. Izuku felt a memory come over him as he thought about everything as a child when growing up with Bakugo. He felt that everything he did in his fight with the adult Bakugo was everything he wanted to get out against him, but also some closure. He was fine with the apology from the much older Bakugo towards him as a singular memory of when they were both children opening a card pack. It showed an ultra-rare All Might card that they got from a small game they played together as children. Izuku pulled out the small card he had as he smiled sadly at it. He just wished his Bakugo could apologize to him, like the adult version of the boy did. Tears came to his eyes as he remembered Bakugo's words again and shook his head as he laid himself down on his bed inside his room within second heaven. It was a few days since Izuku saved Class 1 from the League of Villains, if that is what Izuku heard right from the news he gets from heaven. From what the angels in heaven gossiped about, when Izuku came in to save those who were in danger from the League, apparently All Might was going to be super late and Izuku coming in saved the entire class from destruction or being killed by villains. So he was understandably happier when he found out that there was only one slight casualty, with 13 being incapable of being a hero for a little while. Although he had taken notice that some of the angels were looking more concerned as of late, and it wasn't until Griselda came over to him with a furious expression on her face as he was training on his own. Midoriya, Michiel and Gabriel have a new task for you as well as those who are going to be your assistants. Griselda said, as she growled out in anger. What is it, Griselda-senpai? Izuku asked, as the woman visibly relaxed when he walked over to her. For some reason some of the angels in heaven whenever he came by were always calmed down by his aura, and it worked better on Griselda than most others. Thank you for your calming aura, young man, but we have a massive issue about the fallen faction within our pantheon. Griselda said, grimly. What did they do? Izuku asked, looking slightly concerned. With your strength and magical prowess, you have been selected in order to head down to a small town within Japan. Our agents from the church within the Vatican had sent out 2 people who are going there, one is Irina Shido, and the other is my adopted little sister Zenobia. Your mission is to retrieve the stolen swords of Excalibur from Gabriel, a fallen angel cadre who seeks to start a war against all 3 factions at once. Griselda said, as Izuku's eyes bugged out. What in the heaven are you sending me out on? A suicide missions? I'm not strong enough to take on a cadre class being from the fallen angels, Izuku said, completely fearful. I know that is what I told Gabriel as well as Michiel, but they told me that your mission is going to be something different compared to those of Zenobia Quarta as well as Irina Shido. Your mission is to hold out until Surzich's Lucifer arrives so that you can take down Gabriel before it's too late. Griselda said, as Izuku thought about it. What information does heaven have on Gabriel? Izuku asked, seriously. If he was going to hold of a fallen angel cadre class being, he wasn't going in blind about what his opponent likes to do, he was going to study his opponent, as well as his likes, dislikes and many other things that makes the angel tick. But there is one thing that he will be looking out for, his fighting style. From what Griselda informed him about the fallen cadre class being, Gabriel was a 10-winged man who could use magic like it was the back of his hand, but with Izuku primarily using physical fighting prowess, he was many times better than Gabriel in that front. Not to mention that Izuku is a 4-winged young man who can handle magic like he was a natural at it. He only knew life spells where he could heal those around him, as well as make barriers out of the earthly ground, but he could still use light spells against the man for offensive attacks. Not to mention that his sacred gear, the True Longinus, could still be used against Gabriel. He would just have to make sure that the man doesn't get his hands on it. Otherwise, the new wielder of the spear would be him. So yeah, no pressure. As Izuku was leaving heaven he was collecting his things, since this could take a few days in order to complete the mission. So he was completely taken off guard when Mirana had come up to him with a sad expression on her face as she pulled him into a hug. Which conveniently placed his face right into her impressive bust as he twitched slightly before placing his arms around the girl's back. I'm going to miss your presence for a few days, however long this battle takes. You got everything you need? Mirana asked as Izuku nodded at her as the girl smiled. Don't worry, you're going to be great at what you are going to be capable of doing. I just hope that you don't, Mirana said. The topic of death didn't come up, but it was hanging in the air. I'm not going to die, I still have to complete my mission and repay Gabriel-sama for all that she has done for me. She helped me when I was in a terrible place and managed to get me to live a life that I think is worth it in the long run. So I am going to do everything in my extended life possible to make sure that I can repay her for the debt I surely owe her. Izuku said as he hugged Mirana once more before looking over the edge of heaven and jumping off, letting his wings splay outward to fly away. Completely oblivious to the fact that Mirana was blushing as he left. Izuku was landing near the airport where Zenobia as well as Irina were going to touch down in Kuo Town. As he waited outside, he looked for people wearing priestly garbs or nun outfits, and sure enough he found them walking out before they noticed his presence in the crowd. Who are you? Zenobia asked as Izuku stared at the young woman. Don't trust me off the bat. Well, come with me, I will inform you about your mission for Excalibur in a few minutes. Izuku said as both girls followed him with both haste as well as concern. They soon arrived at the church within the town of Kuo as he led them inside, and they could see the remnants of black feathers within the place. So this place was used recently as a fort for the fallen angels. It could be an outpost for them, but whatever. Izuku muttered as Zenobia and Irina got tired of being ignored as Izuku used his magic to fix the church. Alright, enough of this waiting. Who are you really and how do you know about our mission? Zenobia called out as she pointed her blade at Izuku's throat. The young boy had looked at the blade before poking it away from his throat as he pulled out his own spear and sat it next to himself. My name is Midoriya Izuku. I was a civilian within Musatafu Prefecture, Japan, before I was adopted by Lady Gabriel into her Brave Saint program. I am the Brave Saint of Hearts, her ace. Izuku said, revealing the large A on his chest. Then he revealed his emerald wings on his back as the girls immediately bowed towards him as they apologized for being rude. Don't worry, if I was in your position, I would be leery of those who claim to know about my mission as well. But for the time being you all need to keep the money you have only for food and water, so no buying things that are useless to us. Izuku said, staring at Irina as the girl chuckled a bit. Where did you get the spear though? Zenobia asked, as Izuku smiled sadly. This is my sacred gear, the Trolonginus. I've been training as an angel for the last few months. I am a four-winged angel as you saw. Izuku said, as the girls nodded. With your strength we could surely defeat Kacchan and return the Excalibur swords back to the Vatican. Irina said, as Izuku interrupted that line of thought. Well, I am going to have to tell you both some bad news, like really bad news. Izuku said, as the girls looked at him cautiously. We are going to have to recruit the help of the devils of this town in order to assist us in our mission. Izuku said, as Zenobia called him out. How could you say that? Are you really an angel? I thought the devils are your enemies, Zenobia said, pulling out her blade. If you would let me finish, we cannot defeat Kacchan all alone. The devils of this town could help us greatly if we can allow it to happen. No grudge matches, we need to work together against Kacchan, who by the way, is a 10-winged fallen angel. Izuku said, glaring at Zenobia who just sulked. Now we will be informing the devils of our presence in their town by me releasing my magical power to bring them here. If they can sense my magical presence, they all will come here seeking out why my presence is here. Izuku said, as he stood outside the church as the girls watched as his emerald aura bursted out catching them by surprise. His magical presence alone was strong enough to be powerful enough to take on a high-class devil in terms of raw power alone. But Izuku had something that some high-class devils usually don't do though, he had a brain as well to pick up where his brawn couldn't. As soon as Izuku felt the telltale sign of the devils returning his burst of power release, he walked back inside the church so that they could get back to planning before the devils arrived. It wasn't until later that evening that two peerages within the town arrived outside of the church, and as he waited behind the door, he heard them conversing outside. Opening the door, Izuku looked at them as they got prepared to fight him as he opened the door completely and allowed them inside. Come in, we have much to talk about. Ria's Gremory, Sona Citri. Izuku said, as both devils looked at one another before following him inside. Izuku also took notice of how there was a brown-haired boy, as well as a blonde-haired boy looking at him with both concern as well as caution. Sitting down on the steps to the podium towards the basement of the church, Izuku smiled at the devils sitting in the pews looking at him with caution. So who released that angelic presence in our town? Surely they know that this town belongs to us. Rias asked, as Sona nodded. More importantly, how do you know about me and Rias? Sona demanded as Izuku revealed his emerald wings to them. His halo was golden though. Rias and the others got on their attack stances as Izuku placed his hands up in order to seem as non-threatening as possible. I didn't come here for a fight, just to talk. Izuku said, as Rias sat down immediately as Sona looked at him with caution. So what brings you to our town unannounced? Sona asked, as Izuku looked at her. I announced myself earlier today if you remember. That was me asking for your presence here to talk. There is some news that you all need to know. And it pertains to a certain blonde swordsman here. Izuku said, as he saw the face of the young man across from him glaring at Zenobia as well as Irina Shido. What does Kiba have to do with anything you need? Rias asked, glaring at Izuku. 2 or 3 Excalibur swords were stolen from the Vatican the other day, and it was Kacchan who stole them. I have a reason to believe that he is planning on taking both of you girls out in order to create a new great war between all 3 factions within the Christian pantheon. Izuku said, as both girls looked at him in shock. How did he get in Kuo then? We didn't sense his presence entering our field around the town. Sona asked, as Izuku looked at her pointedly. That is because he is a fallen cadre class being. He can hide his magical presence like it was a piece of candy he was eating. He is older than you two combined, so he has much more experience in hiding his presence than you both do. Izuku said, as he stood up and walking over to a spear that the brown-haired young man was looking at. Grabbing the spear, Izuku looked at the young man before getting a draconic aura from the boy as he smiled. Well, didn't know that Ria's Gremory could get the infamous Drag Y Gotch from the Dragon Clan on her side. Izuku teased as the brown-haired boy stared at him in shock. How do you know him?" the boy called out, as Izuku smiled. "I simply did my research and you completely confirmed it me. I have my own questions about Drag, as well as dragons as a whole, but I can ask those questions later," Izuku said, as Rias moved over to the boy as she pulled him away from Izuku. "You are not stealing my servant," she said, protectively. "I'm sorry. But I wasn't going to steal him, just ask questions about Drag. Whatever, I was originally going to ask you both if our groups could team up in searching for the Excalibur swords. My mission though is different from Zenovia Quarta and Irina Shido," Izuku said, as the brown-haired boy looked at the girl. "Wait, Irina?" the boy asked, as Irina looked over at him. "Oh my god, I can't believe that you were turned into a devil. What happened?" the girl asked, as she ran over and pulled him away to talk. What in the world happened?" Sona asked, as Izuku answered for them. "Irina Shido was Issei's childhood friend. She kept talking about him in the time that it took you all to come here. She said that she wanted to see Haidu's parents again to talk with them," Izuku said, as both peerage leaders looked at him. "So what is your mission here in Kuo then?" Sona asked, as Izuku led the leaders away from their respective peerages. "My mission here is to hold of Gabriel in enough time so that Surziches could arrive here and put the man down for good. Gabriel is an opponent that even I can't defeat on my own, and that is even with my own sacred gear," Izuku said, as both girls looked at him. "You have a sacred gear?" Rias asked, looking as if she wanted to know. "We are getting distracted, but I have the true Longinus as a sacred gear. I'm working on getting my balance breaker to activate, but I'm close," Izuku said, as Rias looked at him. "You have the true Longinus? How would you like to join my peerage?" the girl asked, as she flaunted herself off to him. "As enticing as that sounds, I'm going to have to say sorry and say no. I'm already a part of another faction if you hadn't noticed from the wings," Izuku said, as Rias pouted. "I wanted a strong peace," the girl whined as Izuku chopped her head. "I'm sure that you will be happy that when this is over, I will be in search of a school to go to during that time. So I'm sure you will see more of me later on," Izuku said, as the girl nodded. "Why is Kuo the main attraction for any and all danger?" Sona sighed as Izuku shrugged. "I certainly hope that this doesn't make our plans of working together be strained at best," Izuku said, as the women nodded. "We will do our best to inform you of anything that happens in our town. If there is a sighting of someone using Excalibur blades in the town, we will inform you," Ria said, as Izuku gave them his phone number that he was gifted by Gabriel. "You all should probably head home. Me and the girls here will wait until dark to start our initial search of the town," Izuku said, as the devils all left the building. As Rias and her group were leaving, Drake decided to make his appearance known to the group as he seemed slightly worried. "I never thought that I'd survive an encounter with a wielder of the true Longinus," Drake said, as if he was sweating inside the boosted gear. "What are you talking about?" Issei asked, as Drake made his concern known and pass on to them all. "Last time I had heard about the true Longinus was the fact that it belonged to a man named K-K-Kacchan. And from the last time I had heard about him from my previous host, he was a part of the heroes faction," Drake said, as the group looked even more concerned. "You think that this new angel had gotten the upper hand on this K-K-Kacchan guy and managed to take his spear?" the Kendo asked, as she looked at Issei with concern. "It's either that, or the young man had been selected as the next wielder. But you should all be wary around the boy. He may seem young, and from what I could sense he has only been an angel for around 3 to 4 months. His power increase from the moment he became an angel should have been slow at first before his gains become easier to make. So unless he is training every single day, he shouldn't be getting this strong this fast. He's already stronger than you are at present, partner. Keep your eye on him should he betray you, but if you wish to work with him, be sure that you make him your fucking ally. The true Longinus is a spear that can pierce through any kind of enemy, devil, fallen angel, god or anything else. It's killed gods who were weaker than the Hindu god of destruction for much less," Drake warned as the group gulped simultaneously. With Izuku, Zenovia and Irina, they were pacing back and forth inside the church as Izuku thought about his words to the devils. "So are we going into the town to search for the weapons?" Zenovia asked, getting antsy. "We are, but it will be later tonight, where we would have the element of surprise. That way it would be easier to find our enemies in the dead of night, but remember, don't go off on your own. You can be easily defeated on your own if you don't have allies around you," Izuku said, as the girls nodded. "What about you, sir?" Irina asked, as Izuku looked at her. "I will be in the air, getting a bird's eye view of where you both are at. That way we can have more ground covered from me since I can see in the dark," Izuku informed as the girls nodded. Once it was in the dead of night, deep dark seeped into the town as the trio walked out of the church into the arena, showing them around the place so they could have landmarks to come back to if they got lost. As Izuku went into the air to watch over their directions, he kept himself out of range of what he believed for Gabriel's range of sight would be if he was in the sky. Keeping himself hidden in the clouds that covered the sky, Izuku watched as the rain started to pelt down on the town below. He watched as a spare priest that the church had sent into the town was cut down by a home nearby as he landed nearby. Looking at the person who killed the priest, he watched as the man's face became shown to be a crazed man with Excalibur rapidly. "Oh. What's this? Someone has come to," the man said as he charged at Izuku as the young man pulled out a spear. Swinging it against the blade, both weapons clashed, creating friction as sparks flew off their weapons as they moved about at a fast pace before clashing again. "What is your name, Pavist?" Izuku asked as he glared at his opponent. "My name will be the last one you hear for a very long time. My name is Fried Selzen. Remember it in your own grave," the man said as Izuku immediately gained a cold expression on his face, taking this fight completely serious. As Fried came flying at Izuku with crazy speed, Izuku kept his eye on the young man as he came at him from all directions with a slice of his weapon. Izuku waited for the final moment of truth as the excommunicated priest had come to attack him from behind as Izuku spun his spear around in the air as Fried closed in on him. Izuku then turned faster than Fried could comprehend as Izuku pierced him through the head with the true longinus as the man twitched on his blade. Looking at the Excalibur in the now dead Fried's hand, Izuku yanked it out of his hand before looking at the other weapons underneath the cloak. He found a few more Excaliburs in his possession as Izuku smiled to himself, grabbing the weapons and causing them to disappear with a magic circle. He took off to the skies, one more Excalibur to go, and the girls can leave. But as he left, he felt a presence near him from the rooftops, but the only glimpse he could get of the man in the rain was the bishop's attire he wore as he disappeared in a magic circle. "If that is who I believe it is, then things are going to be worse than I thought," Izuku muttered to himself as he set out to find Irina Shido and Zenobia Quarta in order to sleep for the night. Returning to the church with the two girls behind him, Izuku thought about his next moves as the girls hid the Excalibur swords inside the basement of the church. They both didn't wish to leave Izuku all alone with the devils, believing that they would try and trick him into joining their side instead of staying with heaven. So as they slept inside the church, Izuku went into the basement to contact Michiel and Gabriel in order to inform them about what he had found in Kuo. Looking at the magic circle he was using to call up Michiel and Gabriel, he didn't have to wait long before one of the two answered his call. "Izuku. What is going on? Did you complete your mission? I haven't heard anything from Surzich's yet." Michiel's voice comes in as Izuku sighs. "Well, I managed to get a couple blades from an excommunicated priest who was trying to kill me earlier tonight. But there is an even bigger issue that you all need to know about. It's about the Holy Sword project that I learned whilst training under Marana," Izuku said as Gabriel's voice came in. "What about the Holy Sword project?" she asked, concerned. "Alper Galilei was just seen in Kuo Town. I believe that he is working with Gabriel in order to cause chaos within the Christian pantheon with the great war that Gabriel wishes to restart," Izuku said as Michiel sighed. It was quiet before Izuku could hear something explode in the background of heaven as a new voice made itself known. "That bastard is still alive. I thought we had him killed after he was excommunicated from the church," the new voice called out as Izuku thought about who the person was. Not to sound like a broken record, but who just spoke just now? "I haven't known that there was another seraph between Michiel, Gabriel as well as Raphael," Izuku asked as the new voice made his tone known. "My name is Uriel, and I am the more scientifically attuned seraphim within heaven. When you return, I would like to look at the true longinus, just so we can find out what its powers can do. But other than that, keep the sisters of both Leviathan and Lucifer alive. If they die, it will mean the end of all three factions as a whole," Uriel said as the call was abruptly cut off. "Well, if you can't beat them, make sure that you purge them," Izuku said, sighing. The next morning Izuku was standing watch over at the entrance to the church as he saw some unsavory individuals coming towards it. Opening the door, he found that they were fallen angels who were looking similar to Gabriel in a way from all the images he saw of the fallen angel cadre in heaven. They revealed their black wings and demanded that the swords that were rightfully theirs be returned without him being hurt. Izuku stared at them before pulling out the true longinus as he made mincemeat of them all as he turned them all into a small pile of black feathers. Using purge to destroy the evidence of them even being there, he looks around the area in order to see if there are any scouts who are trying to find any weaknesses within his form. He re-entered the building as he locked the door as he thought about his next move in order to become an even bigger threat to Gabriel in terms of raw power. Going back into his original training with his spear, he went through the motions as he made his training as hard as possible as he image trained that he was in a massive battle against Gabriel himself. On the inside it was a massive battle between him and Gabriel as the two traveled through the skies trying to kill the other. On the outside his body was completely relaxed as he meditated in a form that was similar to that of a monk of a different religion. He kept his mind in the battle as he tried to take down the completely overpowered villain in his mind, but nothing had worked as each time it ended with Gabriel coming up with terrifyingly different ways to take him down. As soon as his image trained with Gabriel was completed, Izuku stood up from where he sat as he looked over at the two girls who were sleeping on the pews inside the church. Shaking his head at their complete obliviousness of the situation they were in as they were in a territory that really wanted them dead based on the people inside, he checked the time before leaving the room. Once outside he went around the city in order to see what the sights could give him, as he thought about how Gabriel would be wanting to see who stole the weapons he was going to use to kill the devils with. So as he was sitting at a seat near a cafe eating some breakfast, he was approached by someone who he didn't think would have come back to visit him. "Hey dude. Want to hang out? I'm Issei Haidu by the way." Issei introduced himself. "Nice to meet you Haidu-kun, but I'm having a moment to myself at the moment, but you can join me for breakfast," Izuku said as the boy sat down. They would talk to one another about whatever was on their mind at the moment, and it was clear to Izuku that Issei was very interested in how he became an angel of heaven. Unaware of the fact that he was being stalked by a small girl with white hair, he told Issei that he was approached by Gabriel herself and asked to become an angel of God by her. He admitted that he wasn't in the right headspace when he made his decision to join heaven, but he wouldn't trade it for the world. Their conversation eventually went from how he became an angel to how he started to spout about women's bodies like they were goddesses who should be praised. Don't get Izuku wrong, women should be treated with respect, and he agreed that some of the women he'd seen in heaven were surprisingly extremely beautiful. But he thinks the boy's perversion is causing his mind to be collected upon one singular goal: to get laid. Just the topic of this discussion is making his wings flicker between their emerald look to the black color of the fallen angels. "See, could we change the topic? I don't wish to become a fallen angel," Izuku said, as Issei immediately knew what was wrong as he talked about something different about his pastimes. Apparently, the boy liked to play with pottery and make any kind of figurine since apparently, he had been really good at it. Once the topic was thrown at Izuku, the young man made a mental note about whether to tell Issei about his crippling addiction to heroes when growing up before a different idea had come up. As a kid growing up, his drawings of heroes as well as heroes without their suits in a normal look was something of a hobby he had other than writing about their quirks as well as fighting styles. So he informed the boy about his hobby of artistry as he talked about drawing heroes whenever they were in costume and not in costume based on what he saw from them. The young man then asked if Izuku had any lewd images of the heroines as Izuku shook his head. He would rather not make such things about heroes, it wasn't right. He only made them in depictions about their surroundings, such as walking around a mall, on a date with someone else, or just relaxing on their couch watching TV. Once their conversation was completed, Izuku paid for the breakfast as he left Issei to his own devices as he walked around the town. He eventually ran into a blonde-haired nun who was looking around the place for someone as she eventually fell onto the ground. Helping her up, the girl looked into his emerald eyes, and for some reason they stared at one another for a moment before Izuku shook his head and helped the girl up. "Hey, are you an angel? Your presence is really telling," the girl timidly asked as Izuku nodded. "I am an angel, Ace of Hearts," Izuku said as the girl smiled at him. "I had always wanted to know how life was like as an angel, but I never made it to heaven. See, could you ask Sir Michiel if he is there if I could be forgiven for becoming a devil?" the girl asked as Izuku asked for her name. "My name is Asia Argento, and I was excommunicated because I healed a devil who was incredibly injured," Asia said as Izuku thought about it. "I can certainly try, but I can't make any promises. But if anything, I'm sure that he's sorry for having you excommunicated from heaven's forces," Izuku said as the girl smiled sadly and hugged him as tears came from her eyes. Holding her in a hug, he pulled her away from him for a moment before wiping the tears from her eyes as he told her one thing that she would be forever thinking about. "Don't cry, many people cry because of their situation. But the real reason one should cry is because of something akin to loss, such as the loss of a loved one or the loss of a close friend or animal. If you show that you are easily manipulated to cry, it shows that you can be taken advantage of," Izuku said as the girl happily nodded and thanked him for the advice. Moving down the road once more, the day had soon turned to night as he saw a massive barrier around a school off in the distance. Thinking that it has something to do with his mission, he walked over towards the barrier, finding Sona and her forces holding it up as there was fighting inside. "What's going on here?" Izuku asked as Sona looked at him. "I don't know what happened, but Gabriel had come here demanding us where the Excaliburs were, and we have no idea what he was talking about. Then he sicked hell's hellhounds on us," the girl said as Izuku's face became hardened. "Open the barrier so I can come in, I need to finish what I started," Izuku said as Sona opened a small part of the barrier so that Izuku could enter. Stepping inside the barrier, all he could see around him was chaos incarnate on the school grounds. Walking towards the area where Gabriel was located, he found that there was hellhounds moving in on Riaz and her peerage as they desperately tried to fend them off. Seriously? Hellhounds, it just had to be hellhounds. Izuku muttered to himself as he placed himself high in the air to not be noticed by Gabriel. Charging a light spear in his left hand, he threw it down in order to cause some chaos. It also caught the attention of Gabriel as he saw the pure light radiating off of it. Looking up, both him and Gabriel had shared a glance at one another before Izuku stared to fall from the sky slowly. Riaz and her peerage had looked up in shock as Izuku descended upon them. Surprisingly, Arena and Zenobia were here as well. Seems like they were assisting with the destruction of Gabriel, as well as Valper Galilei, as the man was dead on the ground at the moment. So can someone care to tell me what is happening, and why hell's hellhounds are on the surface? Izuku questioned as another hellhound ran towards him. It was here that his sacred gear appeared in his left hand as he swung it behind himself, slicing the dog in half from up above and down. The dog disintegrated into small modes of hellish energy before Izuku glared at Gabriel, who clapped at his ability to take them down with ease. Congratulations, Ace of Hearts. I cannot believe that Gabriel would send her newest angel to take me on. Color me impressed with your abilities. Gabriel laughed. Well, if I didn't come here, then you would probably cause too much mayhem for the Gremory peerage to handle. So Michiel saw it fit to send me out in order to get as much experience as possible, in order to learn as fast as I can. Izuku said, as he floated in the air. As Gabriel watched as Izuku gathered his power into his spear, he smiled as Izuku's face was becoming enriched by the nature surrounding him. Trees were forming around him as an eldritch abomination was forming around his angelic body, and Gabriel couldn't help but smile at the recreation of God's first man as a magic spell. I will create enough time for Surziches to arrive and put you down for good. I just hope to damage you enough beforehand. Adam's grace. Izuku called out, as a massive treeman had formed the body of a giant Adam from mythological proportions. Using his magical energy to power up the giant tree man of Adam, he and Gabriel had entered combat as they caused destruction to the school that would need to be replaced by magic in order for it to seem like nothing happened. Izuku doesn't know what happened or how long the fight lasted, because in what seemed like hours Izuku was feeling the outer layer of Adam falling apart as a spear of light pierced through the top of the tree man's body through the skull, cutting off Izuku's power supply to the creation and forcing him to be ejected out of the creation of magic. Once he landed on the ground, he was kneeled as Gabriel had landed not far in front of him as he seemed winded for some reason. I never thought that you'd be capable of creating a construct of God through magic. Your reserves must be getting incredibly low if you are kneeling. Gabriel said, as Izuku stared at him confused. He felt like he could continue with another Adam at least, but then he felt a metallic arm touch his back as he looked back at Issei, who said one word. Transfer the power I collected, Drag. The boy said, as Izuku felt a massive amount of power coursing through himself. The power was so massive, his body automatically had grown 2 more wings to support his newfound power at the moment. What in the world just happened? Izuku asked, as he felt his newfound power. Dragon, I gave you our collected power, now kick his ass, Izuku. Issei called out, as Izuku looked over at Gabriel, who was preparing for another Adam spell. Izuku smirked as he floated into the air as lighting coursed all around him as he thought about all the power. He wanted to make Gabriel feel the pain of suffering like those who had fallen to him in the past. Raising his sacred gear True Long Ina spear into the air, he collected all the power he could use, as well as all the power he still held within his body, before it caused the True Long Inas to start to rattle with all the uncontrollable power. Smirking to himself at the amount of power, Izuku had started to charge a new spell that he had learned recently under Mirana. So I know that you want to learn an offensive spell, but this one will make any attack you throw always land and hit its mark. Mirana told him. What do you mean by that? Izuku asked, as the girl smiled at him. Well, the spell allows the user to use any kind of weapon they are channeling their power into, and it will make the weapon capable of not missing its target, even showing the opponent that if they don't try to block the hit, they will die in the most gruesome way possible. I hope that this helps you in defeating Gabriel and showing him that peace really is an option to have in this world. Mirana said, as Izuku thought about his next answer. What is its name? Izuku asked, as the girl smiled. It's his true name is called, the girl said, before we come back to Izuku. True Spear of God. Izuku called out as the spear became completely angelic in color as well as power. As soon as the weapon had fully collected all the power Izuku held within his body, he threw the weapon at Gabriel, who immediately tried to dodge out of the way, only to find the spear still after him. Then Gabriel had tried to take the spear all the way back to Izuku, who only smiled at him as he punched Gabriel in the face, stunning him for but a moment as the spear became too close for the fallen cadre to block as it pierced through his upper left torso, just missing the middle of his chest. As it was struck in the middle of his chest, Izuku floated over to Gabriel's floating form as he coughed up boatloads of blood before glaring at Izuku harshly. Izuku grabbed the spear before pulling it out of the now dangerous and fatal wound of Gabriel as the fallen cadre fell to the ground in pain. As soon as Izuku landed in front of Gabriel, he watched as the fallen cadre was struggling to hold in his breaths as he was nearing the end of his life. He was standing before Gabriel as the man glared at Izuku as if it would kill him, but something horrible happened as Izuku rose his spear in order to finish the fallen cadre off. He felt something pierce through his lower abdomen and go through his back as he looked up to find that a white armored person stood before him. Stumbling over to a spot where he could collapse onto the ground, the church girls ran over to him as they had tried their best to stop the bleeding. But even they were captivated by who had attacked Izuku and watched as the unknown man had taken Gabriel away with a chuckle before disappearing from the area. Another girl had run over to him as Izuku felt himself being repaired completely when he heard a very familiar womanly voice next to him. "I think we should turn him into a devil to save him," the woman said as Izuku shook his head as he opened his eye as he stared at her. "Just because I am at death's door doesn't mean that I want to be a devil," Izuku said as he coughed a little blood as whoever was healing him had worked harder to seal the wound up. Once that was over, Izuku glared at the red-haired girl as she pouted at him before nodding. Just as he was about to pass out from the pain as well as the blood loss, he saw something behind the group becoming larger and larger as he formed the true longinus and threw it at the thing coming for the group as they turned around and found another hellhound. "I swear, hellhounds are just going to be the bane of my existence," Izuku muttered before passing out. That's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.